Welcome to Central Conversations, a podcast of conversations with interesting people who can help us with the issues that we're facing in our lives. Today's podcast is about finding humor and joy, and it's an interview with Beth Green, who's a speaker, a worship leader, and a comedian. I know you'll enjoy it. If you find this podcast helpful, I just invite you to like it and subscribe, and invite you to share it with others so we can help our podcast to grow. Let's go right to the interview. I'd introduce our special guest today. Beth Green is a minister's wife, a singer, a songwriter, an artist, and a comedian. And the most important part of her life is she's a follower of Jesus. And I got to know Beth really from my wife, Kate, who's here. We're here with two special ladies. So I'm going to turn over to Kate to introduce Beth.
Well, I just love Beth. And when Scott talked about doing this podcast, I said, you need to have some humor and lighten up during this season of our in our country and the pandemic and everything going on. And I just love Beth. And I met Beth several years ago going to the minister's spouses retreat and the luncheons, and she just has a way of storytelling and leading music, a beautiful voice, a gifted guitarist, and a songwriter and a storyteller. And I've just always enjoyed her sense of humor. I follow her on Facebook, and she always has fun stuff that just is encouraging and uplifting. So Beth, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I love you too. I'm a big fan. I think your husband's pretty awesome too.
We're big fans of you. So I want to tell everybody a little bit about your professional career. In 1979, you began working in the broadcasting field, and you were a morning radio personality at several stations in Chattanooga and Knoxville. You've done voiceovers for television and radio commercials. And as Kate said, you're a public speaker, a worship leader for various conferences, and now you get to serve in ministry again alongside your husband after so many years of serving together. Now you're serving as the music director of First United Methodist Church of Alcoa. Beth enjoys sharing her humor and loves to make people laugh. She has a blog where you can find out more about her, and we'll put that in the show notes. It's Life in the Greenhouse at blogspot.com. And I like in her emails, she puts in the emails at the very end, put the chocolate in the bag and nobody gets hurt. So that makes me laugh. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, both of you.
Yeah, so this is just going to be kind of a freewheeling conversation. One of the things that Kate and I love about you and Joe is you're upbeat and you're positive and you keep growing. And so, as you know, this has been a difficult time in our nation's history, and but it's also important to laugh. The book of Ecclesiastes, says there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. And so, just for you, as you think about 2020 and as even 2021, I mean, how have you been able to kind of keep your spirits up and laugh and smile?
Well, I need to open up first with saying that I have struggled with depression for several years. I've been on medication, I think, since 1995 or 96. And I feel like me again. But this pandemic wreaked havoc on me, as I'm sure it has just about everybody. And I had just had shoulder surgery, had just gotten into the hospital and out before everything got shut down. So I did my therapy, my physical therapy through telehealth, and I can do this now. So I'm doing good. It worked. But I had a real struggle at the beginning, and we hadn't been having in-person worship, as you know, we can't be together at church. Family dynamics are different. We didn't get to have Christmas with our grandchildren. I haven't hugged them since Thanksgiving, and my arms ache. But there are things, I'm thankful for technology, that we have FaceTime and that sort of thing, that I can keep up with them. And they show me all their new toys or new things that they know how to do. And that's been really good. But nothing's been normal. And people say, well, I can't wait till things get back to normal. I don't know what normal will be. Everything's going to be different. And there comes a time when when I just have to push past it. And I've talked to my husband a lot. He's a good listener. And by the way, he's very upbeat. He's a morning person. When I was in morning radio, you should have given me an Academy Award for acting like I was awake and glad to be there. But he's a very happy person and all the time. And it gets on my nerves sometimes. But when he wakes up, he's ready to go for the day. And it takes me a while. And I have to read, he comes in and does his devotion, everything. I lay in bed and do my devotion and hope that I don't go to sleep again. But I'm trying to stay in the Word during all this time, like I know I need to, but I also try to laugh a lot. And I used Facebook, and one of the things that Kate was talking about was the funny stuff when the pandemic first started and everything was on hold. I started doing these LTYLs, and I gave them numbers. LTYL is laugh till you leak. And I'm so irreverent. But I thought that those would be fun. And I wrote some of them myself. I would find funny things on Facebook. Friends would send me things. And when I stopped at number 300, I had people ask me, will you do some more? Will you start it up again and give more number, and I'm like, well, that was fun, but I was drying myself out writing stuff and finding things. So maybe I'll do that again. Maybe I won't, but if I make tears run down somebody's leg, then I consider it a day well spent.
So I'm just wondering, where does that come from? I mean, was that something that you learned from, your family, or did it something that just, it learned in school, you just kind of stood out? I mean, where did you being able to see that come from?
Well, the comedy really started professionally when I was at a minister's wives retreat, and the entertainment for the night didn't work out. The video that we were supposed to watch, it was Chonda Pierce, who was one of my favorite comedians. And it didn't work out. The thing wouldn't play. And so the girls are standing in the back going like this, stretch it. And so I started singing some of the songs I've written, like Memories of the Body I Once Had, and things like that. And so they kept telling me to keep stretching. So I started telling stories, and funny stories from the ministry. Of course, you can't use the names because somebody might get appointed there, and but I started telling stories, and then I got other people telling stories. And probably 5 or 6 months later, I had a pastor's wife contact me and say, can you come and do a program for our UMW? And I said, sure. How long do you want me to sing? She said, oh, I forgot you sang. I said, well, what did you want me to do? Because that's what I've done for years. And she said, well, I wanted you to make us laugh because we've had some tragedies in our church, and we need some laughter. And so we decided we'd ask you. And I said, well, I would be honored. And so that's how things started, word of mouth. I never advertised. I don't have a web page or a website or whatever you call it. Facebook is probably my best word of mouth as far as doing comedy. But that's how I got started. Now, I don't think I was a jokester in school. I was more of an instigator. It's kind of like, wouldn't it be funny if we, and then like when I made brownies for the freshman basketball team, and it was filled with X-Lax. I used melted X-Lax in it. Yeah, they really went for it, so to speak. But things like that. I was an instigator more than anything, and I was in plays, and so I learned how to be a ham. And my mother was hilarious, but she didn't know it, and I could play off her any day of the week, and it was fun.
I'm curious, how big is your family? I mean, what number are you? Are you an only child? Do you have any brothers and sisters, or how does that work?
I'm a spoiled baby.
Ah, okay.
I have 2 older brothers and a sister that's in heaven now. And I was always the one. I wore our parents down, I
Okay.
think, or maybe they wore them down when I got to them. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
So have you like always kind of seen the world with like just a little differently than others, or just in terms of being able to notice things that are funny?
Yeah. Joe's helped me with that. Joe has helped me learn to laugh at myself and to notice things around me more than maybe I did before. He's a funny guy, and very real. And so, I guess I maybe noticed him picking up on things more than I did. And I started seeing things around me differently just being married to him. We've been married, it'll be 47, golly, it'll be 47 years in May. And he still loves me. Uh,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, you guys are 20 years above us. We'll be married 27 years in May.
oh, that's
So,
wonderful.
28. When is your anniversary?
31st.
31st. Okay. So
Yeah.
Memorial Day wedding.
We had to get married before my father and my brother and my, who else had to go to annual conference in June. And we had to do it after Joe graduated from seminary. So May 31st was perfect. It was a Friday night. Joe asked me, what night do you want to get married on? I said, well, my dad has to be in church on Sunday and my brother. So, I really need to get married on a Friday night. So that's what we did. And they weren't busy at the funeral home that day. So we were all set. His family's in the funeral business. So
I
Yeah.
think you need to tell that story.
you want me to tell that story about Joe? Okay. So Joe takes me home to meet the family. And before we ever even had our first date, we were on our first date, I guess. And he told me that his father was a Southern planter. And I thought, oh, I'm dating money. And then he told me he always had crop failure and that he was an undertaker. So when we went home to meet the family, we'd only been together about 3 weeks, I guess, when he wanted me to meet the rest of the gang. And he's one of 7 children. So there was a lot to meet.
Right.
And that weekend, he took me to a cemetery where his grandfather was buried. And we pulled into the cemetery in the middle of the afternoon, and he asked if I wanted to get out and walk. And I said, well, I'm not going to stay here by myself. And so he took me up to this big tombstone that said Green on it and stood on Grandpa and said, I was wondering if you'd like to be buried in the family plot. And I started laughing. And I said, now? That's how he proposed. He's that romantic. And we were married 3 months after we met, which I don't recommend because it was hard. It was hard for both of us because, we didn't really know each other that well. But over 47 years, I think I've got the hang of it now. His family was flabbergasted when they found out we were getting married 3 months after we met. And I think we worried everybody, but I think we've been married the longest in my family anyway.
What are some of the things that, kind of, or some things or people who kind of make you laugh now, like whether it's on TV or things you read? What's been some of the things that have, given you a sense of finding your own sense of humor, make you laugh?
Joe, to a degree, he and Hannah would roll their eyes a lot, but there were some times that they didn't, that they actually laughed. So I thought, well, that was funny. I need to remember that. Mother. I loved Robin Williams. I thought he was hilarious. Jerry Seinfeld is one of my favorites. I love him. Robert G. Lee. Have you ever heard of Robert G. Lee? He's on Laugh USA on Sirius XM. I think it's channel 98 or something like that. And we've become friends on Facebook and have communicated a lot. He's written a book called What's the Big Idea? And it's about God and creation and laughter. And it's very interesting. I got it on Amazon. I'll advertise for Robert, but he's a very funny guy. He probably makes me laugh as much as anybody. And his wife's a family therapist. Can you imagine the material? It's great. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So, I mean, there are some people who are just seem like they're naturally funny. It just normally comes right off. And then some who, maybe aren't so much funny. Can you actually learn to be funny, or to tell a joke to make people laugh?
Hmm. I'm not good at telling jokes. I can tell stories, but jokes to me are different. There's one guy that his name is Stephen Wright, and he's very serious and he talks very seriously. And
I remember him.
he says hilarious things and then has no facial expression whatsoever after he said it. And I thought he must have had to really practice in front of a mirror to be funny and not respond to it, because it's really bad though when a comedian gets up and is telling a story and laughing so hard they can't tell the story. That ruins it. I had to learn to not do that. But yeah, I don't know if you learn how to be funny, or if you just tap into what works for you. I think God created me he had to have a sense of humor because he made me, but I think he puts something in us that we can tap into. So I don't know if you can learn to be funny or not. Can you learn to be a preacher? Yeah, but you have to be called, right?
Right. It sure helps for
Yeah.
sure. But yeah. Uh, yeah, I guess I was just trying to think, with humor, and even as you think about the image of God, I mean, just to get real theological for a sec, I mean, I guess if we're created in the image of God, uh, how does humor kind of come alongside of that? When we express humor and joy, is that, uh, you know, that's part of the divine nature, right? I guess.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, look at the disciples following Jesus. Would you follow a guy around that was morbid or just very serious all the time and couldn't, be lighthearted at all? He had to have gotten so tickled at like when there was all the leftovers after the loaves and the fishes, and everybody's astonished and he's thinking, was nothing. You should see what I'm going to do in about 3 years. No, but I think that he had to have had some joy, or they wouldn't have wanted to be around him. Do you like to be around unhappy people? I don't. I don't do well with that. I
No.
try to egg them on.
Right. And I guess sometimes you probably got a lot of fun out of making people who are maybe not sourpusses, or maybe have forgotten how to laugh. I mean, is that part of the joy when you go to different places to try to get them to make a chuckle, to get some engagement? Talk about that.
It is one of my favorite things to do is I go over here to Morning View at Blunt Memorial Hospital and do programs or sing or whatever. And now a hard thing to do is to get Alzheimer's patients to laugh until you tap into something that they know, like a farm story or about a teacher or something that maybe will cause something to click. And I can sing a hymn and they'll know every word. And they might not know my name when we're done, but they knew what we were doing. And that's a blessing. I love to go talk to them. And I haven't gotten to do it in a while because the times they need me is when I'm at work, but it's a special time.
Mm.
I probably enjoy that audience as much as anything. My favorite audiences are women, because I have programs for women only where we talk about PMS, and yes, I have PMS and a gun. Any questions, kind of thing. I'm kidding. I don't. But I have different audiences and I have different acts for different audiences. But when you're working with older folks that probably don't have that much laughter, it's fun to get them in there and make them smile.
So since you focus more on stories, I'm curious, like, so say you have a story, a material, you think, oh, there's something there, that I can tell in a different setting. So how do you do that? I'm just asking, like, do you write that down? Do you think about crafting words in a certain way? Do you kind of wait for it to marinate till it's ready? I mean, I'm just curious of.
That's what I do. I have on my cell phone, I have a whole list in my notes of lines of things to remind me of something to write a story about. And if it's not ripe, I don't do it. I don't even write it. But it took me 20 minutes to write the song about my body, if my body was a car, and what I would do, memories of the body I once had. And that took 20 minutes. I have another song that has taken me, it took me almost 2 years, because I would just work on it when I thought of something and then I'd put it away. And it's the song about what I have in common with Victoria's Secret models. We're hungry. That's what we have in common. We're hungry. But there's more to it than that. Like I won't do it. This is a church podcast, right?
Is there a spot on YouTube we could link to that in the notes or something?
I need to do that. I don't have a YouTube channel. I need to do that. You remind me, Kate, remind me to do that sometime.
You need to. You are so funny, and you have such a gift. And I know I enjoy hearing your stories over and over again. I don't know how many times I've heard you tell the story about you getting engaged, but that's just one of my favorite stories. And so, joining the family plot and
best hits, Beth's best hits.
Yeah. And I think you had a good point too, of just laughing at yourself, not taking yourself so seriously. I remember when Scott and I were newly married, I really just laugh at myself because I do crazy things all the time. And he was like, "You're just laughing at yourself." And I'm like, "Yes, I really just
might as well.
You need to laugh at yourself.
Yeah. Life's too short.
Yes, we need to laugh.
Now, and, if I remember, I can't remember the specifics, but I think it takes more work to frown than to smile, right? Muscles?
More muscles to frown, yes.
Right. So
serious, I have to concentrate.
If you want to work out, frown, right?
Yeah. What's really hard is because I'm a lay speaker in the United Methodist Church, it's really hard to stay serious through a whole sermon. I mean, I don't. Obviously, I don't. I've spoken at your church and I just don't have that in me. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I think that's great because people really remember the comedy. I mean, they remember the story when they laugh. And
yeah. One of my favorite stories is, Joe, does Scott use you for, Kate, does he use you for sermon illustrations sometimes?
Yeah, he's really good, a little bit, but he's really good about just trying to honor us and not do that. I don't know, he does a really good job at that. But
Joe always asks first.
Yes,
and,
he always
but I always figured that turnabout's fair play. And so one of my favorite bits is that I start out with is learning to laugh at yourself. My husband taught me that when he went to the bathroom during a worship service and left his microphone on. And he really did do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I'm not laughing at him. Huh?
The audio guy learned a really important lesson that day, right?
Yes, to never leave the board and come down and put your offering in the plate, because things can happen. And of course, when he came out after using the restroom, and nobody was at the soundboard, so nobody turned it down, so everybody heard it. Somebody thought, I found out years later, well, let me tell you this first, that he comes out and we're singing Praise God from whom all blessings flow. That was just terrible. And it was hard. But I found out years later when I went back to be a lay speaker at that church that he had served and done that deed, that we had a baptistry. There were only 2 churches in the district that had a baptistry, and ours was one of them at Fort Oglethorpe. And somebody thought that a kid had gotten in there and turned on the baptistry. And that's what that sound was. And I thought, that's really bad. Yeah, I don't think I've told Joe that yet.
Well, before we air this podcast, you can tell him. So,
okay.
When, there's certain times when you feel like you're on, you're just connecting. I don't know, you're just kind of in the zone, in the flow. Can you tell like a story of that, an example of what that was like for you?
It's a terrible feeling. It's like the worst feeling. And I talked to Joe about that one time when I was having I was doing a bit, and I'd always gotten good laughs on it. And that audience was just different. And I won't say that it was because it was a different denomination, but I kind of wonder if maybe they had a problem with me because of my denomination. But that whole night was exhausting. And when I came home, I felt like it was a complete failure. What really surprised me is that that this missionary couple that was there as guests that night contacted me on Facebook and said, we haven't laughed that hard in a long time. And I thought, you were the only ones that did. But so I made one couple happy, but that was one of the most exhausting nights. And it just bombs. It just sits there in front of you, and you can't make them laugh if it's not funny to them. And it was hard. That was a hard night. And I've had a couple of times when a bit doesn't go over. There are things that I know are always going to go over, like anything I tell about my mother. One time, my sister and I were sitting on the edge of her bed at the nursing home, and I was making a joke about, my humor is mostly self-deprecating. And so Hannah was 16 at the time. And of course, when you're 16, you know everything. And I pray that Lord would make me only half as smart as my little girl used to think I was, and only half as stupid as she's convinced I am at 67. But I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and I made a joke to my mom about my body. And I said, Mom, the Bible says that our body's at the temple of the Holy Spirit. And she said, yes, it does say that. And I said, I've added on a fellowship hall. And she looked at me and, oh, I said, when I was pregnant, it was a family life center. And I said, now I'm working on mega church. And my daughter at the time said, Mother, self-deprecating humor is unbecoming. And my mother looked at her and said, self-defecating humor? What kind of humor is that? That's the kind of stuff, mother always makes it better.
Yeah. Well, and there's probably just a sense of exhilaration, right? Every time you get in front of a crowd, you sort of have your material or things you're going to share, and you probably shape your story differently depending upon it. And there's a sense of how's this going to connect, right? And when it does connect, when it lands, it just feels so good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Know when it's working, and it just feels good. And I feed off that, and that's that makes it worse because I keep going. But I have a time limit, and I watch my clock and that sort of thing. And so I know if I'm touching my face and it's COVID, but we're on camera, so I'm okay. Right. Sorry.
You're at home by yourself, right?
So. I am. Well, he's at home in the shower. He just got in from walking. But yeah, you kind of know when it works. And so when it doesn't, you find a different avenue or go in a different direction. But when it works, it's really, really fun.
So as you think about, like, what are some of the things that are making you laugh right now, or that you're finding humor that's really filling your soul to kind of that overflowing idea? What's making you happy right now?
I'd rather say what's making me joyful right now.
Okay.
Because happiness, we all know happiness is an outside job and joy is an inside job. And there's not a whole lot to laugh about right now if you just look at the way things are with health, with the world and the situations that we're all in. There are people, today is Inauguration Day when we're recording this thing. Right. And there are some people that are very, very happy. And there's another group of people that are very upset. And then there's the middle that's kind of like, well, God's in control. I'm not going to worry about this. And that's the way we all probably need to be anyway. But I have to tap into the joy that's inside. My sister was sick for a long time with chronic illnesses, autoimmune disorder and stuff. But when she died, and it'll be 8 years ago tomorrow, when she passed away, it left such a huge hole in my heart. For like a year, I had a hard time functioning. I canceled all my comedy stuff. I couldn't do any of those things. I just couldn't. Um, but she was a person who had real joy in the midst of everything that was happening to her. And when she got sick, she had a ruptured bowel and sepsis took over, and then her organs failed, and then she had a massive heart attack while she was on a ventilator. She had a massive heart attack, and the doctor said it would have dropped her to the ground if she'd been out walking around, that she would not have known what hit her. And there were so many times when I would lean over to her and tell her, it's okay for you to go. It's okay. We're going to be all right. And then I'd turn right around and come back and say, I didn't mean it. I don't want you to go. And all I could think of was all the joy that she would exude, even when things were just so rotten for her. And she did not have an easy life, not just wealth, but other things too. And she was a pastor's wife. And I used to joke and say I wanted to grow up to be like her, but she was only 5'2", so there was that. But it has to come from deep inside. It has to be something that only Jesus is going to give us. Only Jesus is going to give us. So I didn't mean to get morbid at the end. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Yes, sir. It's kind of like waking up every morning after you've lost a limb, and every day you learn how to function without it. And that's what I've done for 8 years, because we were unusually close. We lived together before we got married. We were just really super, super close. And people were kind of surprised when they would see how close we really were. And I think, Kate, you got to meet her at a minister's wives retreat. And she was just, if you met her once, you knew her for life, because she was that way. And I'm not quite like that. I don't exude the joy that she always, I think when I get to heaven, she's going to go, hi, honey, because that's just what she does. And I long for that day.
One of the things I've been doing is making phone calls to people during the pandemic and checking on them. And sometimes a 5-minute phone call turns into 30, and so I guess what I was going to ask you was, maybe I could put it this way. Imagine if you could speak to that, and maybe there's a person watching who's now in that season that you were in, and really find it really hard to smile, and really feeling anxious or depressed, or feeling like they want to give up, and they want to find joy. They want to laugh again. I mean, what would you say to that person?
Life is short, and we can't spend it thinking about ourselves. And one of the things that you're doing when you call as a pastor, you're doing it, but I'd say that even if you dug ditches, you would still get joy out of talking to someone and giving them what they needed. Or if you were a physician, or if you're a veterinarian, or if you're, a blue collar worker, whatever, if you have an opportunity to help someone else look at their life and see some good there, there's always, you can always find the good. I think I actually put down here, because I knew that you and I were going to be talking, the three of us were going to be talking, and God's word is just filled with promises, all kinds of promises. And he tells us not to be afraid, tells us not to fear, not to worry. And my husband's always saying, Beth, if you've got time to worry about it, you got time to pray about it. So, and I do. And I think that's something that we need to do. But Christians don't have to have perfect lives, but they do need to lean on a perfect God. And getting into his word is probably the best thing that I've done. And I've gotten away from it sometimes and had to go back again. And I read a book by Dr. David Jeremiah called The Book of Signs. And it has a lot to do with the world today, and the second coming, and all these different things. I read that book and I thought, oh, I'm going to get really depressed reading this. Well, I got so excited that I went to his next book, The Overcomer. And right now I'm finding joy in, I think it's Everything You Need. It's called Everything You Need. Um, he's a really good writer, but we serve a perfect God, and all we have to do is dig into His Word. And here's a quote that I love. It's not scriptural, but it's funny and it's true. Life is like a roller coaster. You can either scream every time there's a bump, or you can throw your hands up and enjoy the ride. So I'd rather throw my hands up and enjoy the ride. I'd rather throw my hands up in praise when there's a situation that I don't understand. Now, sometimes it's throwing up my hands in exasperation. Oh God, what are you trying to show me? But it's not worth it to just, dig in your hole and stay there. Call somebody. If you feel bad or feel down, or if you're hurting, call somebody else that might be hurting more and ask them how they're doing. And your situation might look a lot better afterwards, but you have an opportunity to bring joy to somebody that might not have heard from anyone that day. One of the hardest things for me is that I don't get to be with my grandchildren. And, I mean, our daughter wasn't going to have any children. And she got surprised, and she liked it so much she did it again. So I have two little girls, so a 4-year-old and a two and a half, that they make my heart beat, and I can't even touch them right now. And every time I start feeling bad about that, I think about how I wasn't even going to get to have a child myself. And we had Hannah after 11 years. And then after 10 years, they had Ophelia and Azalea. And, it could have been so much different than it is. And I might not be able to touch them, but I can wave at them on a camera, and I can talk to them on the telephone. There's ways to look at situations and get yourself out of the picture. Think about somebody else. It really changes everything.
Yeah. Well, definitely life is a gift for sure. Like you're saying, that's a great image of raising your hands on the roller coaster.
Mhm.
So, if people want to reach out to you to read some of the things that you wrote, where would you tell them to go? Like your blog?
Well, my blog, it's very depressing what I put on there last night, because I wrote about my sister. It's not depressing, but it was marking a time, 8 years.
Right.
But usually I write funny stuff, but I haven't been keeping up with my blog very well. And so they need to read the early stuff if they really want to laugh. But you can go to lifeinthegreenhouse.blogspot.com.
Okay.
Or friend me on Facebook. You'll have to tell me that, when you send me a message or something, to let me know that you want to be friends on Facebook, Beth Miller Green. And I have a lot of folks that I don't know that well, but they've heard me speak, or they listen to me on the radio. I've got friends that I've never met, that listened to me for years. I was on the air about 30 years, off and on at different stations. And I have friends from all those places. And it's fun. So friend me on Facebook at Beth Miller Green. No E on the end of Green, by the way. That's the rich cousins that they put an E on there. We don't.
We'll put that in the show notes there, so that people can link to you. And when you start your YouTube channel, just let us know, and we'll send out those great videos. I'm looking forward to it. Well, thanks so much for your time. Really honored that you're able to join us today, and keep living in your joy.
Well, I'm doing my best, and I know that you are too. And Kate, I love you to pieces.
I love you to pieces.
Her mom and dad were in our church when my husband served at First Broad Street in Kingsport. And they're just as sweet as they can be too. So she couldn't have turned out any other way.
Well, I really am blessed. I have great parents, and they live half a mile away from me now. So I'm so blessed to have them here, and especially during this time.
Yes.
We still see them very with mask on, and try to be cautious with that. But
Yeah.
thank you for being their pastors.
Oh, we
Pastors.
had a good time up there. We just, when Hannah got pregnant the second time, we decided to retire 3 years early and move down here. And in about another 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, we should be living about 10 minutes from them. So
That is perfect.
we're
That's awesome.
excited.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
I love you guys, and you have an awesome church, and just tell everybody, hey, for me.
We'll
We
do
will.
it. Absolutely.
Thank you, Beth. Tell Joe hi.
Thank you. I will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.